I hadn't stepped foot in Woodlake High since the day I walked out of the graduation ceremony and never looked back. Now, 20 years later, the air still carried that peculiar blend of waxed gym floors, artificial eucalyptus from janitor mops, and distant ambition. You could bottle it and sell it as suburban nostalgia. My name is Naomi Vega, and tonight was our class's 20th reunion. I arrived alone, and this choice was not meant to make a statement, just easier. I wore a charcoal gray dress that fit well enough to seem deliberate, but not so well that anyone would assume I had something to prove. The venue wasn't the school gym, thank God. It was a refurbished downtown hotel with too many chandeliers and not enough warmth. Everyone had already entered, their voices rising and falling like waves amidst a surge of nostalgia. The valet barely offered me a glance. I didn't care. That kind of thing used to sting, but I'd long since mastered the art of invisibility. The name tags sat on a satin-draped table by the entrance. A young woman with a headset handed me mine. Naomi Vega, it read in Helvetica. No title, no honorific, nothing to be found beneath it. But that was intentional. I'd RSVP'd anonymously. I didn't want the evening to be about credentials. The main ballroom looked like a wedding reception for people who'd married their resumes. Tall candles, a long buffet table draped in white, and a looping video reel on a projector screen. The display included photos from the senior prom, marching band, football triumphs, debate wins. My face appeared maybe twice. Once blurry, the yearbook photo depicted me as if I hadn't slept for a week. At the center of it all, of course, was Eliza Wynn. She was known as the town's golden girl, class president. She has a distinguished Ivy League legacy. She was the first to become a partner at a Boston-based firm. Her smile was just as polished now, though something about her eyes felt more like surveillance than warmth. She stood at the microphone, perfectly lit, recounting her journey from honor student to high-powered attorney to founder of a political action committee for the common good. But it all started here, she said, her voice saccharine with just a touch of showmanship, at Woodlake, where we learned to lead and shine. And speaking of shining stars, I want to thank everyone who showed up tonight, even those we didn't expect. She looked directly at me. The applause was immediate and performative. I didn't smile, didn't flinch. I simply made my way to the back corner table, number 17. Closest to the fire exit and furthest from the projection screen. There were no nameplates. There were also no gift bags. The only items present was a half-empty carafe of water and a basket of stale rolls. No one recognized me at first. Gabriel Price, a former track star who was now a wealth advisor, didn't recognize me until he squinted and approached me. Naomi Vega? Holy crap, you're here. I nodded. Hi, Gabriel. He laughed nervously. Wow, where have you been? You just kind of disappeared after graduation. I moved east, I said simply. That much was true. However, the narrative was incomplete. Another voice chimed in. Melissa Tran, once valedictorian, now a biotech exec. Wait, are you Naomi Vega who was supposed to go to Stanford but vanished? I gave a polite shrug. Life pivoted. Gabriel raised his eyebrows. We heard rumors. FBI, NSA, secret spy stuff. Rumors are usually more entertaining than the truth, I replied. It wasn't a lie. Eliza approached, her heels clicking on the parquet like gunshots in a quiet room. She hugged me, a performative, chilly kind of hug, and whispered into my ear, "So glad you could crawl out of obscurity." I smiled. Nice dress. She said, "It's Dior." She speculated that it could indeed be Dior. It's a shame that the brand doesn't embody humility. She pulled back, eyes narrowing for a second before turning that smile back on. Naomi's always had a sharp tongue, must be handy in wherever she ended up. She didn't know. None of them did. The years I spent in Kyiv under diplomatic cover remained a mystery to her. They were uninterested in the encrypted operations briefings I led at Langley. I didn't focus on the lives I saved, the threats I neutralized, and the sleepless nights I spent deciphering intercepted chatter. They saw what they wanted, a ghost from their past, still in gray, still quiet. They didn't see the scars or the silence worn like armor. They didn't know I'd turned down the presidential commendation twice. And that was fine. For now.
The reunion carried on like a scripted production where everyone remembered their lines. Except me. I stood at the edges, watching as people I hadn't seen in 2 decades toasted to curated memories and sanitized ambitions. The laughter track seemed to be playing automatically. It was that rehearsal. I sipped club soda, my back to the bar. One of the bartenders glanced at me, prepared to offer wine, but after I quickly shook my head, he moved on. I didn't drink at events like this, not out of caution, but habit. During field briefings and midnight calls where survival depended on clarity, I developed this habit. Across the room, Eliza was glowing in a tight satin dress that looked expensive enough to buy half the room. Her arm linked with another former classmate's, the rhythm of her voice smooth as silk and just as cold. Our firm just acquired a new contract for regulatory consulting, she was saying, to a group gathered around her like moths to a spotlight, federal level, very hush-hush. Melissa found me again, a half-full wineglass in hand. Her expression was softer now, more thoughtful than the poised biotech exec from earlier. "You've got that faraway look," she said. I offered a non-committal smile. Old buildings make me reflective. "I doubt it's the wallpaper," she replied. "I remember that look. You used to get it before finals, right before you crushed everyone on the ethics debate panel. That feels like another life." "Or another cover story," she teased, and I almost laughed. She paused. "People say you went dark, that you turned down your full ride to Stanford and vanished." "I didn't vanish. I redirected." Melissa stared at me for a moment, searching, but she didn't press. She never had. And that's why I liked her. Then came the buzz. Low, subtle. You could only detect it if you were anticipating it. My clutch, tucked under my arm, pulsed once. I stepped away, muttering something about needing air, and disappeared into the side corridor that led to the hotel's garden terrace. It was quieter there, save for the hum of HVAC units and distant traffic. A well-dressed man lit a cigar and nodded at me before turning away. I pulled the secure device from its lining and activated it. The screen came alive with a flicker, shifting into a red protocol. Meridian Protocol Alert. Target, PAC HQ, local node breach suspected. Coordinates, 38.9072 north by 77.0369 west. My heart stopped pounding. Years ago, I had trained myself to avoid such a reaction, but something settled low in my chest, a weight. I recognized the address. It was less than 10 blocks from the ballroom, Eliza's headquarters. I stared at the data streams. There were timestamps, encrypted handoff logs, and a flagged USB device registered to a dummy shell company, one that connected to Eliza's donor network. Coincidence? We didn't believe in the word where I came from. The message concluded with a single directive. Engage if proximity is confirmed. Monitor the subject until extraction clearance. I closed the screen and looked out over the garden. Somewhere in that party, under the haze of champagne and charm, Eliza was hiding something, and it was no longer just personal. The door behind me creaked open. Gabriel. He wore the same effortless smile he always had, but it didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. Something about him had grown up, finally. It made him more readable. He said, "I didn't mean to follow you. You looked like you needed space." I nodded. Old habits persist. "You still carry that thing like you expect to be chased," he said, motioning slightly towards my clutch. "It's not paranoia if they actually trained you to expect it." Gabriel blinked, but didn't joke back. He took a breath instead. Look, Naomi, back in high school, we weren't exactly close, but I always respected you. You were just different, focused, stronger than the rest of us, pretending we had it all figured out. Thanks, I said quietly. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. That restraint earned him points. Inside, the party had taken a new turn. The DJ was playing a nostalgic playlist. Someone had started a slideshow. Our class trips, debate victories, and prom nights were captured in photos. Eliza featured prominently. I appeared once or twice, always off-center. Then came the second buzz. A fresh signal emerged. The image of the surveillance remained grainy. I zoomed in. There she was, Eliza Wynne, walking into her PAC office 2 hours ago, plugging in a device, the same one flagged in the breach logs. Copy, encrypt, disappear. No hesitation. There was no trace of authorization. I leaned against the ballroom's edge wall, letting the room blur. Though conversations and compliments swirled around like perfume, my gaze remained fixed on a single face. Eliza was laughing at a joke someone else had told, sipping wine, her posture regal. A woman admired. A woman compromised. I turned on the encrypted channel. Meridian confirmed. Surveillance live. Target proximity within 50 meters. An incoming directive followed. Await intercept protocol. No action without visual validation. I stayed where I was. I didn't confront. Not yet. There are moments when patience is more dangerous than force. Then came the third buzz. The sound was coming from an audio source. The call was intercepted from Eliza's line. A man's voice. The files are prepped. We'll move after the vote next week. Eliza. Good. No delays. The board thinks it's a simple analytics transfer. They won't question it. A pause. I assume Naomi won't be a problem. Her silence was enough to answer. I stared down at the screen until the line cut off. So, she knew I was here. She was planning to preemptively address any information she believed I might possess. That was her mistake. I slipped the device away and walked calmly to the edge of the ballroom where Melissa stood near the dessert table, holding a cupcake she wasn't eating. Melissa, I said, do you still have contacts at the Times? She blinked. Sure, why? We might be giving them the story of the year. What kind of story? She asked, eyes narrowing. The kind where a golden girl sells more than just a brand. She didn't ask for more, just nodded. We'd always understood each other better in silence. And across the room, Eliza met my gaze. She didn't smile this time. She knew.
The next morning, I woke to a skyline painted in soft hues of gray and rose, the kind of dawn that tried to pretend it wasn't carrying weight. I was already dressed, black slacks, steel gray blouse, no badge, no insignia, but everything about me said, prepared. I stared out over the city through the narrow hotel window, listening to the city wake up, watching cars thread the streets like nervous arteries. My encrypted tablet was still warm from the night before. Overnight, I'd received confirmation. Eliza's PAC server had been penetrated from the inside, and the transfer logs tied directly to Project Hyacinth, a covert initiative that had nothing to do with political reform and everything to do with data laundering for a private contractor flagged by 4 intelligence agencies. It was bigger than Eliza. It always was. Melissa met me at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the venue. She had arrived early, her coat draped over the chair and a hard drive tucked in her leather bag. She handed it to me without a word. She said, "These are backups from her old server. The backups date back to the PAC's inaugural year. A friend owed me a favor." I nodded, already plugging it into my secure reader. Files began to populate with information about funding mismatches, donor discrepancies, and access requests related to encrypted nodes that were flagged in government blacklists. "Did she know you pulled this?" I asked. "No," Melissa said, "but she will." I looked at her. She wasn't the girl who used to win science fairs and bake lemon bars anymore. She had teeth now, quiet ones. She also possessed an exceptionally sharp mind. "She was going to thank you," she added. "If you hadn't shown up on your own terms, she planned to out you as unstable."
She described you as a former operative who had gone rogue, unwell, delusional. I sighed. Classic misdirection. Shame it's so predictable. Melissa nodded, then dropped her voice. She's planning to announce a run for Senate. I blinked. That explained the urgency. She's cleaning her past, one narrative at a time, but your presence threatens the illusion. So she's trying to rewrite history before the story can contradict her? Exactly. I stood and closed the case. Then we don't give her time. By 2 p.m., the hotel ballroom had been cleared and repurposed. A press brunch was being held under the guise of celebrating women in civic leadership. Eliza was the keynote. Cameras lined the back wall, microphones everywhere. I hadn't been invited. I walked in anyway. The moment my heels clicked past the marble threshold, I felt the shift. Heads turned. Eliza's jaw tightened from across the room. She was mid-sentence, something about grassroots transparency. Oh, the irony. Melissa was already seated, press badge affixed. She caught my eye and gave the slightest nod. Eliza tried to continue. We build trust by showing our communities that integrity isn't just a value, it's a promise. I stepped forward, unclipping a file from the envelope I carried. A promise, huh? The room was silenced. Her voice wavered, but only slightly. Naomi, I didn't realize you'd be joining us. This isn't a public forum. Good thing I brought evidence instead of applause. Gasps. A few reporters leaned in, camera flashes. I wasn't the ghost anymore. I was the reckoning. I have here, I said calmly, financial records linking your PAC to a shell company registered under a fictitious LLC in the Caymans. That company in turn is tied to a data breach operation flagged by DHS and NATO affiliates under an international laundering probe. Eliza tried to cut me off. That's absurd. Anyone can fabricate data. Melissa stood. Not when it's backed by server logs, internal memos, and your own IP trails. A reporter raised his hand. Is this true, Miss Wynne? Were you aware of these allegations? Before she could answer, a soft chime went off on my encrypted phone. Intercept confirmed. Target network freeze in progress. That meant backup was live. That meant someone somewhere had just pulled the plug on her server. Her phone buzzed. She read the screen. Her face drained. I didn't need to see what it said. I was familiar with the routine. We'd cut her off. And now her narrative was collapsing in real time. Outside the hotel, the sky had shifted. Dark clouds were rolling in, indicating that a storm was approaching but had not yet become thunderous. I stood under the portico, watching as reporters scrambled for rides, questions still echoing behind them. Eliza hadn't been arrested. Not yet. But the investigation was public now, and the narrative, her golden illusion, was cracked wide open. Melissa stood beside me. So what happens now? I looked at her. She'll spin. She'll lawyer up. But there's no walking this back. Not this time. And you? I tucked the device back into my coat. I've got 48 hours before the next briefing. That should be enough time to disappear again. She looked at me, eyes soft. Don't vanish this time. Not completely. I smiled faintly. I won't. But I won't stand still either. As the first drops of rain hit the pavement, I turned away from the echoes of applause and outrage. My story wasn't about being seen. It was about being undeniable. The silence after a storm is never really there. It's loaded. Every whisper of wind feels like it's carrying echoes. Echoes of what had just transpired reverberated through the air. The possibility of future events remains. That's how it felt in the days after the press conference. Eliza's empire hadn't collapsed overnight, but the foundation had cracked wide enough for everyone to notice. She canceled her public appearances. She replaced her elegant gowns with turtlenecks and issued damage control statements. Her PAC issued a carefully worded memo denying intentional wrongdoing, but promising internal review. I didn't need a memo. I'd seen the data myself. By now, my name was in headlines. Not loudly, but present. Sometimes referred to as a whistleblower, other times just a former intelligence operative. I did not participate in any in-depth interviews. I refrained from commenting on these instances. My presence was sufficient to create a stir. Still, it wasn't the public fallout that haunted me. It was personal silence. The long shadow of erasure haunted me. Eliza wasn't the only one attempting to alter history as soon as I took the lead. The alumni board at Woodlake High sent a formal letter, an apology for overlooking my contributions, an offer to reestablish a place for me among the school's notable graduates. It came with a gift basket and a commemorative plaque that looked mass-produced. I left it in the hotel trash. Melissa met me at a library cafe on the edge of town. We sat at a table near the window, surrounded by college students and old books. She slid a new manila folder across the table. "What is it this time?" I asked. "Your file." Eliza removed it from the records of the alumni. I found the original. The original was located in their archives, digitally erased but never destroyed. I opened it slowly. There I was, listed on the National Merit Registry, first chair violinist, president of the International Relations Club, and co-winner of the Ethics Bowl state finals. All removed. "All this time," I murmured. Melissa's voice was quiet. "She didn't just erase you. She replaced you." She was right. Eliza had turned my absence into her narrative advantage. She secured the limelight and maintained it by making sure I never came back to share it. But now people were asking questions. Later that night, I received a private message. There was no name, just a number from a secured line. The voice that followed was one I hadn't heard in years. "Agent Vega," it said. "We need to talk. It's about the files you surfaced. There's more." The safe house was a small flat 2 hours from the city, nondescript, beige everything. I arrived just before midnight. Colonel Adrian Shaw was already waiting. He poured me a cup of instant coffee without asking and got straight to it. Project Hyacinth was a shell, a decoy. The real payload was buried underneath. He laid out a tablet. The screen was filled with streams of metadata, redacted emails. We had only theoretically monitored a group of hybrid operatives, which included political consultants, cybersecurity contractors, and legacy intelligence firms. They called themselves Electo. "So you're telling me Eliza was just a face," he said. "She was an entry point," Shaw corrected. "Electo used her network to map political influence across key swing states. They funneled sanitized data to shape everything from social media campaigns to strategic leaks." "And they thought she wouldn't crack under pressure?" "She didn't, really. But your appearance rattled the timeline. They were supposed to go live with Phase 2 next quarter." "And now?" "Now they're pivoting. You've become a variable, a threat." I exhaled slowly. "So this isn't about exposing Eliza anymore." "No. It's about containment. And you're no longer off-grid." I leaned back in the creaky chair. "So what do you need me to do?" Shaw stared at me. "We need someone inside the perimeter. Someone they'd never expect to walk back into the room." I laughed dry. "You want me to walk into the lion's den? Again?" He slid me a secure phone. "We're not asking, we're activating." The next morning I checked out of the hotel. I left no note behind. I did not leave a forwarding address. The headlines were still spinning. Eliza had issued a new statement calling the accusations a witch hunt, fueled by envy and misinformation. Eliza's statement marked the last moment of a narrative in a state of disarray. However, I sensed that another game was starting beneath the surface. Electo was stirring. Melissa called once. I didn't answer. Instead, I boarded a train north. The trail led me to the next destination. Being invisible for an extended period eventually teaches you how to navigate through walls. And this time, I wouldn't just disrupt the story. I'd dismantle the machine. The train pulled into an unmarked platform just after dusk. There was no welcome sign. There was also no presence of a terminal agent. Just sodium lights casting long shadows over cracked concrete. I stepped off alone, the cold biting, but oddly familiar. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of gulls broke the silence. Coastal. That fit the coordinates I'd been given. A dark SUV waited past the fence. Tinted windows. No plates. The door opened as I approached. Shaw was in the back, phone to ear. He motioned for me to get in without speaking. When the call ended, he looked at me with something heavier than urgency. "We've located their comms nest. An offshore relay station was repurposed as a research center. The center is led by an AI think tank. They're harvesting sentiment data at scale, political, economic, and military, and using it to train predictive models for ideological manipulation." I raised an eyebrow. Deepfakes meet black ops? Deeper. This is behavioral pre-coding. Think of it as hacking elections before the candidates even exist. "And what do you need me to do?" He handed me a dossier. "We don't need exposure. We need disruption. Silent, targeted, precise." "You want me to ghost them?" His silence was enough to answer. I opened the folder. Maps, floor plans, personnel tags, and a list. Names I recognized. Former colleagues, ex-intelligence. One of them had trained with me. Another had recruited me. A few had vanished off the grid years ago and now resurfaced here. It wasn't just betrayal, it was reclamation. "This isn't a mission," I said quietly. "It's a reckoning." He nodded. "And you're the fulcrum." 3 days later, I was inside. The building was sleek and sterile. The building featured white panels and minimalist furniture. On the surface, it looked like any other startup chasing venture capital buzzwords. But underneath, it pulsed with something darker. I could feel it. Every hallway felt like a trap built to look like a promise. I was embedded as a visiting analyst, Naomi Valen, behavioral systems consultant. The alias was deep enough to pass scrutiny. My credentials scanned clean. My background is planted. My first task was to audit a sentiment model. What I observed was unsettling. They weren't just analyzing people, they were simulating them. Each subject, a living, breathing person, was being mapped down to emotional volatility thresholds, ideological leanings, and reactive triggers. They could build a digital double of anyone and predict with horrifying accuracy how that person would respond to certain messaging weeks, even months in advance. The implications weren't theoretical. I saw logs from pilot campaigns, rolled out in 3 states. The logs revealed subtle shifts in language, nudges, echoes. The impact is significant enough to influence voting decisions. These echoes have the power to split communities apart. All information is traceable and can be refuted. At night, I transmitted logs to Shaw via a dead-drop relay. I encoded every byte. I burned each access after use. I slept little, and when I did, I dreamed of static. But then, on day 6, it got personal. The system flagged a profile. Mine. Not Naomi Valen, Naomi Vega. They had built a model of me. They had created a comprehensive model of me. The system knew my decisions, my trigger points, and my alliances. It predicted my reappearance weeks before I stepped back into the public eye. It had a name for me, too. The ghost variable. Someone inside the system had been tracking me long before Eliza fell. I backed out of the system immediately. My pulse wasn't racing, but something else was. A slow burn in my chest. Someone here knew I was coming. Perhaps they anticipated my arrival. I left a final data drop that night. This time I flagged it with one word: purge. Extraction came at 2:43 a.m. Shaw met me just beyond the North Sector gate. His eyes were bloodshot. "We've pulled everything. We have removed all servers, logs, and nodes. It's going public, a coordinated multi-agency leak." "And Eliza?" "She's flipped. She has agreed to testify. She didn't build the system, she just sold access." "And Electo?" "Splintered. But Electo is still alive. They'll surface again." I looked out over the distant lights of the compound. They were dimming one by one. "Then we'll be ready." He put a hand on my shoulder. You did what no one else could. You took back your name and burned their narrative with it. I nodded. It was never about the spotlight. It was about the shadows. 2 weeks later, I stood in the Hall of Legacy. Same school, same maroon banners. The polished floor remained the same. But this time, the plaque bore my real name, Naomi Vega, class of 2003, integrity in silence. I wasn't wearing a uniform, no medals. I wore a soft charcoal coat and maintained a steady gaze. Melissa stood beside me. Her eyes shimmered. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am," I said, finally. A few students filed in behind us, wide-eyed, whispering. A young teenager approached me and asked me boldly, "Did you really stop a shadow network?" I smiled gently. I just reminded them that we're watching back. She beamed. "I want to do that too." I looked at her and saw echoes of myself, before the noise, before the ghosts, before the silence. Then start by listening to what they don't say. That's where the truth lives. As we walked out into the crisp winter air, I felt it. Not closure, not applause, something deeper. The legacy lies not in the volume of your story. The significance lies in the duration of its reverberation.
What did you learn from the experience? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest betrayals can ultimately lead to growth and renewal. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes losing what you thought you had is the beginning of finding something